Mike Mentzer is an enigmatic figure in the world of bodybuilding, a true genius who, despite his immense contributions to the sport, remains a mystery to many. He was the first man to achieve a perfect score in an elite competition, the 1978 Mr. Universe, a feat that still echoes in bodybuilding history. This event marked not only his physical prowess, but also his sharp intellect, as Mike was a fervent advocate of innovative training theories. He helped popularize the principles of high-intensity training, developed by Arthur Jones, which promoted short but extremely intense workouts, challenging the traditional logic of long hours in the gym. This approach transformed the way many athletes viewed training, making Mike a pioneer in optimizing workouts. In addition to being a proponent of high-intensity training, Mentzer also brought a scientific mindset to bodybuilding. His books were filled with philosophy and science, addressing not only physical techniques, but also the mental aspects of the sport. He believed that bodybuilding was as much a philosophical journey as a physical one, something few understood at the time. Mike spoke about the importance of calorie counting and precision in diet long before the popularization of flexible dieting, which has become a trend today. He advocated a mathematical approach to food consumption, preaching that controlling calories was as essential as the training itself. This set him apart, as while many athletes focused solely on intense training, Mike viewed the body as a machine that needed to be fine-tuned on all fronts, from training to nutrition. Despite all his knowledge and success, Mike was never able to claim the title of Mr. Olympia, one of the greatest mysteries of his career. Considered by many to be one of the best athletes of his generation, he retired before reaching the peak of his potential. His early retirement was a protest against controversial judging decisions, particularly after the infamous 1980 Mr. Olympia, where he was defeated in a result many still consider an injustice. This episode was pivotal in his career and in how he viewed the sport. Mike always believed that competition should be fair and that bodybuilding was a sport of merit, but this loss deeply shook his beliefs. Behind the image of a successful bodybuilder, there was a personal side marked by internal battles. Mike struggled with drug addiction for many years, a vice that eventually negatively impacted his physical and mental health. The pressure of the sport, combined with his frustrations, led him down a dark path, which many believe was a key factor in his permanent withdrawal from competition. His loss at the 1980 Olympia was more than just a defeat on stage. It was an event that struck at his core. It not only distanced him from bodybuilding, but also made him rethink his entire approach and relationship with the sport. Despite these difficulties, Mike is still seen as an icon by many in the old-school bodybuilding community. His name is synonymous with dedication, innovation, and intelligence in a sport that often values only physical strength. He left behind a legacy that transcends the trophies and titles he never won. The influence of his ideas on training and nutrition continues to live on today, and his philosophical thinking about bodybuilding remains relevant. Mike saw the sport as an expression of both body and mind, something that deeply influenced the way many trainers and athletes approach bodybuilding today. It's undeniable that Arnold Schwarzenegger is truly one of a kind, someone who transcended bodybuilding and became a legend in multiple ways. His journey in the sport and in pop culture is unmatched, and he will forever be remembered as an icon, especially for the era he dominated. When we look at the physiques of the 1970s, we see a level of excellence that seems hard to surpass even by today's standards. However, this is not a critique of modern athletes. On the contrary, it's a reflection of how advanced guys like Mike Mentzer were for their time. If we analyze it in detail, we'll see that many of the concepts and training methods they introduced are still references in the sport today. This realization leads us to ask, how can someone like Mentzer, who was so revolutionary and ahead of his time, not receive the same recognition as other athletes of that era? Mike wasn't just a bodybuilder with an impressive physique. He was a true thinker of the sport, someone who brought a philosophical and scientific approach to bodybuilding. Throughout this video, we will explore more about Mentzer's story, understand the impact he had on the development of bodybuilding, and more importantly, discuss why he isn't remembered as he should be. It's a question that many fans of the sport still ask themselves. What happened to Mike Mentzer's legacy? And of course, This is the longest introduction I've ever given to an athlete, but let's be honest, Mike Mentzer wasn't just any athlete. He deserves this attention. Now, before we dive deeper into his story, I'd like to take a moment to remind you that if you enjoy my content and want to support this channel, consider becoming a member. It's a simple way to contribute and helps me keep producing videos like this. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. This also helps YouTube understand that this type of content deserves to be recommended to more people, increasing its visibility. Now let's continue with the story of Mike Mentzer and his impact on bodybuilding. Born in Ephrata, Pennsylvania, in 1951, Mike Mentzer discovered his passion for bodybuilding early on. Since his teenage years, he was an exemplary student in high school and began developing an interest in weightlifting at the age of 12, inspired by the impressive physiques he saw in fitness magazines at the time. From that point on, he decided to mold his body into a symbol of strength and muscle, embarking on a journey that would lead him to become a legend in the sport. In 1965, at just 13 years old, Mike made his first major trip to the Mr. Olympia competition, accompanied by one of his father's former training partners. This event changed his life forever. There, he had his first encounter with Larry Scott, the man who won the first 2 Olympia titles. And it was at that moment that Mike decided he too would one day become Mr. Olympia. With unshakable determination, young Mike went beyond mere inspiration. He crafted a detailed plan for his future bodybuilding career, something uncommon for someone so young. He confidently wrote, "Mike Mentzer, Mr. Olympia in 1972. Mike Mentzer, Mr. Universe 1974. Mike Mentzer, Mr. Olympia 1976. Although these dates didn't unfold as planned, they reveal the early ambition Mentzer had. This young visionary already had a clear vision of what he wanted to achieve in the sport, a testament to his focus and commitment to the goal he set for himself. Mentzer, however, wasn't just a potential bodybuilder. He was a brilliant mind, equally fascinated by the body and the mind. This combination of physical and intellectual prowess made him a singular and deeply intense individual. In school, he excelled as a top student, and later in college, his exceptional grades confirmed his academic talent. His initial goal wasn't to become a bodybuilding star, but rather a psychiatrist. He was determined to explore the depths of the human mind, a field that fascinated him almost as much as building the body. However, before pursuing this professional path, Mike fully committed himself to amateur bodybuilding, competing in his first contest in 1969 at the age of 18. This unique combination of physical strength, intellect, and ambition marked the beginning of an extraordinary career in bodybuilding. Mike not only sculpted his body with precision, but also carried with him a mindset of continuous development, always striving for more, both in terms of physique and knowledge. In 1971, Mike Mentzer made a connection that would change the course of his life forever. That same year, he enlisted in the Air Force and participated in the Mr. America contest, where he placed 10th. The winner that year was Casey Viator, a young, promising bodybuilder who was being trained by Arthur Jones, the creator of the high-intensity training method. Jones was already gaining notoriety for promoting his innovative protocols, which emphasized short and extremely intense workouts, focusing on maximum effort in each repetition. Viator, one of Jones's primary guinea pigs, dominated the competition with an impressive margin, which caught Mentzer's attention. Fascinated by Viator's results, Mentzer reached out to him for advice. This encounter was the starting point for Mike's introduction to Arthur Jones, a mentor who would forever transform his vision of training. Mentzer frequently mentioned the profound impact Jones had on his life, not only in the physical aspect, but also in how he began to view the world. In an interview with the late bodybuilding journalist Peter McGough, Mentzer revealed, "Arthur Jones caused a fundamental shift in how I thought about training, but more than that, his greatest influence was on my way of thinking." Mike added that while parents and teachers superficially valued logic and reason, Arthur Jones was truly passionate about those values and actively encouraged them. From that moment on, Mentzer completely adjusted his training approach. He drastically reduced the number of sets he performed, replacing quantity with intensity. Each workout was executed with maximum efficiency, pushing the body to its limits in every repetition. The results were impressive, and Mike began to see significant gains in strength and muscle development. However, his career was temporarily interrupted by a shoulder injury, which prevented him from showcasing all his progress on stage. Additionally, the increasing responsibilities in the Air Force demanded much of his time and energy, pulling him away from bodybuilding competitions for a considerable period. These obstacles delayed his rise in competitive bodybuilding until the end of 1974, when he was finally able to return to the sport with more focus and determination. The influence of Arthur Jones, however, remained a powerful force in his life, shaping his approach to training and his life philosophy. Mentzer not only became a fervent advocate of the high-intensity method, but also began questioning and challenging the conventional training approaches that dominated bodybuilding at the time. In Jones, he had found a mentor who valued the mind as much as the body, and this would be a key difference in his journey within the sport. Mike Mentzer began his successful bodybuilding journey by winning the Junior Mr. America, taking first place at an impressive weight of 190 pounds, about 86 kilograms. This was just the beginning of his rise in the sport. Shortly after, in 1975, he competed in the Mr. America, appearing at 194 pounds, about 88 kilograms, where he finished in third place behind renowned athletes like Roger Collard and Robbie Robinson. Even without winning, his physique was already starting to draw attention, with a combination of muscle mass and definition that set him apart from other competitors. From there, his career took off, solidifying him as one of the most controversial and fascinating stars in bodybuilding. Between 1975 and his retirement in 1980, Mike achieved a series of victories and titles that placed him among the great names in the sport. He not only won the Mr. America and Mr. Universe titles, but also triumphed in the heavyweight division of the Mr. Olympia, one of the most coveted titles of the time. More than his titles, it was the way Mike approached training that set him apart. While many athletes of the era followed traditional methods with long training sessions, Mentzer revolutionized bodybuilding by adopting and vigorously promoting the principles of high-intensity training, advocating for shorter workouts focused on maximum muscle efficiency. When Mike Mentzer started training, his goal was clear and simple: to look like Bill Pearl, a 5-time Mr. Universe champion and one of the greatest icons in bodybuilding at the time. Like many young, aspiring bodybuilders, Mike sought advice from fitness magazines to achieve his goal. However, he soon encountered a common problem of that era. The magazines recommended high-frequency and high-intensity training programs, but rarely considered the genetic advantages or the use of chemical substances by elite bodybuilders. For a young man like Mike, who idolized these champions, it was hard to question the recommended methods. If every champion was training 6 days a week, for at least 2 hours a day, who was I to question these practices? These guys were my heroes, so I followed their lead. Mentzer wrote in his book, reflecting on his mentality in his youth. At that time, at just 15 years old, Mike had few responsibilities and plenty of energy, making this type of exhausting training bearable. However, as he matured, both as an athlete and as a thinker, Mike began to realize that something was off. The standard training methodology didn't seem to produce the results he sought, and the physical toll became more evident over time. It was then that he came across Arthur Jones's ideas and began to embrace the high-intensity method, adapting it to his own reality and needs. By adopting Jones's principles, Mike started to modify his training routines, opting for fewer repetitions and focusing on maximum effort in each exercise. One of his first high-intensity routines, which eventually became famous, was called heavy duty. This revolutionary method completely transformed the way Mike trained, abandoning excessive volume in favor of movement quality and maximum intensity. By reducing training time and increasing efficiency, Mike not only optimized his physical results, but also saved time, which became crucial for his longevity in the sport. Mike Mentzer was known for his radical and innovative approach to bodybuilding. While many athletes followed high-volume routines, he chose a very different technique, performing only one exhaustive set to muscular failure. Typically, these sets consisted of 6 to 9 repetitions, with the goal of achieving maximum exhaustion in each exercise. To maximize the impact of his training, Mike often used techniques like pre-exhaustion and forced repetitions, pushing his muscles to the limit before moving on to the next exercise. With this approach, his workouts rarely exceeded 45 minutes, a stark contrast to the traditional method of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who trained twice a day, 6 days a week, as described in his famous Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. Mentzer believed that the secret to muscle growth lay in reaching complete failure with a single exhaustive set. He saw this as the most efficient way to force muscles to adapt and grow. What made his approach stand out wasn't just his training philosophy, but the clarity with which he advocated for it. Mike wrote in a clear, coherent manner, and above all, had proven results. His bodybuilding career was marked by major achievements, including a perfect score at the 1978 Mr. Universe contest, a victory that solidified his reputation in the sport, and his win in the heavyweight division of the Mr. Olympia, where he faced top-level competitors. Together with Arthur Jones and Casey Viator, Mentzer helped popularize high-intensity training, inspiring a new generation of bodybuilders to explore this approach. The less is more philosophy spread throughout the bodybuilding world, challenging the idea that endless hours in the gym were necessary to achieve results. One of the greatest examples of Mentzer's influence was Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia winner, who adopted the high-intensity method and took it to his own level of success. The connection between Mentzer, Jones, and Viator laid the foundation for a revolution in training, redefining how many athletes approach muscle development and training efficiency. Dorian Yates, one of the greatest champions in bodybuilding history, completely changed his training approach after reading Mike Mentzer's works. Yates' famous blood and guts training style was actually a direct adaptation of Mentzer's high-intensity method. Mike was a man who didn't concern himself with others' expectations and firmly followed his own convictions, both in his training and in his philosophy of life. His books, like Heavy Duty, not only detailed his training methods, but also contained deep philosophical passages where he encouraged readers to think critically and question norms, advocating for objectivism, a philosophical doctrine that promotes rational pursuit of individual happiness. Mentzer believed that people shouldn't accept advice or practices as absolute truths, but should examine them for themselves. This critical thinking permeated his entire approach, from training to diet. The passages in his books, though often complex, reflected his determination to analyze everything independently without being swayed by trends. During the 1970s and 80s, bodybuilders' diets were often quite rudimentary. Many competitors drastically cut carbohydrates before a competition and followed extreme diets based on meat, eggs, or even just meat and water. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the most successful athletes of the time, adopted a ketogenic style approach, which was considered one of the few more scientific practices of the period. On the other hand, Mike Mentzer was an exception in this landscape. Long before the concept of "if it fits your macros" became popular, he was already using calorie counting as the basis of his diet. This was particularly evident before the 1979 Mr. Olympia, where he won the heavyweight division. Instead of following extreme diets and eliminating favorite foods, Mike opted for a simple plan. He counted his calories and maintained control over his food intake without depriving himself of anything he enjoyed. This approach was revolutionary, especially at a time when most bodybuilders still followed dietary methods that bordered on the extreme, often without solid scientific foundations. Mentzer was decades ahead of his time, understanding that balance and rational control were more effective than total deprivation. 3 decades before the popular "if it fits your macros" concept, he had already demonstrated that it was possible to maintain a balanced diet and still achieve impressive results in bodybuilding. His contributions weren't just in the realm of training, but also in how modern bodybuilders approach nutrition. Mike Mentzer's teachings on diet, which were considered unusual at the time, eventually became common mantras in the fitness industry decades later. He wrote in a straightforward and simple manner, "If you're on a well-balanced diet and in a caloric deficit, eating refined carbs like ice cream or a chocolate bar won't harm your weight loss efforts." This mindset was revolutionary at a time when most bodybuilders adopted extremely restrictive diets before competitions. Before the 1979 Mr. Olympia, Mentzer followed a diet rich in carbohydrates and, unlike many of his contemporaries, didn't deprive himself of foods he enjoyed, like pancakes and ice cream. Even with these indulgences, he kept his caloric intake below 2,000 calories per day, an approach he considered balanced and efficient. The result was impressive. Although he placed second at that Mr. Olympia, many experts and fans considered him the competitor with the best muscle definition of the event. Mentzer demonstrated that extreme diets were not necessary to achieve a competitive-level physique, as long as calorie control was maintained. Even so, while his training advice quickly gained popularity, his nutritional recommendations took longer to be widely accepted. It was only decades later, with the rise of flexible dieting and the concept of if it fits your macros, that the fitness community began to recognize the importance and effectiveness of Mentzer's dietary teachings. Mike was far ahead of his time in showing that it was possible to maintain a balanced diet with tasty foods and still achieve an impressive physique. His focus wasn't on deprivation, but on intelligent calorie intake control. The caloric deficit concept he advocated, even when accompanied by unconventional foods, gained traction years later, proving that his ideas about nutrition were correct and that, when applied properly, they could bring excellent results without sacrificing the enjoyment of food. Now, let's discuss a fascinating topic. Can Mike Mentzer be considered a forgotten genius of bodybuilding? This is a question that has long sparked debate in the community. In my opinion, the answer is yes. Mentzer was a pioneer who accomplished incredible feats, such as the perfect score in a bodybuilding competition, something still impressive today. He was also responsible for advancing training protocols, bringing the concept of high intensity to the mainstream. His nutritional approach challenged the dietary dogma of the time, long before practices like flexible dieting became popular. However, despite all this, he is not automatically regarded as a legend by all fans of the sport, partly due to his early retirement and his death at 49, which limited his direct contributions to the sport. Mentzer won the heavyweight division of Mr. Olympia in 1979 and was widely tipped as the next big name in bodybuilding. He had everything to continue rising and win more titles, but his decision to retire after Arnold Schwarzenegger's controversial victory at the 1980 Mr. Olympia derailed those plans. Mentzer placed fifth in that competition, but many believe he could have ranked much higher. In the following years, athletes like Franco Columbu, Chris Dickerson, and Samir Bannout won the Olympia, until Lee Haney began his dominant reign in 1984. During this period of uncertainty at the top of the sport, it's possible that Mentzer could have won his Mr. Olympia title had he remained active in competition. Despite his early retirement, Mike didn't completely disappear from the scene. He continued to write about bodybuilding and share his ideas until his death in 2001. However, the 1980 Olympia loss was a blow that affected him deeply, taking years for him to recover emotionally. This episode, in particular, is one reason why many believe Mentzer could have achieved much more in the sport had he handled the result differently. His absence from competitions, combined with his early death, caused his contributions to be overshadowed, even though they were so significant to the evolution of bodybuilding. During the 1980s, journalist Peter McGough described Mike Mentzer as someone who was in free fall, both in his career and personal life. In one of his seminars, Mike took an openly critical stance against the IFBB, particularly regarding the Sydney case, which he believed led to his unofficial banishment by the Federation. As a result, event promoters became reluctant to hire him, marking the beginning of a difficult phase in his career. In 1982, he was dropped from Weider Publications, and his annual income, which had once been $200,000, dropped to zero by 1983. In this dark period, inventor and entrepreneur Arthur Jones, his former mentor, recruited Mike and his brother Ray to work with him on research projects at the Nautilus headquarters in DeLand, Florida. However, things didn't turn out as Mike had hoped, and after 6 months, the business relationship with Jones came to an end. In the fall of that same year, Joe Weider offered Mike a new opportunity, rehiring him. However, just 6 months later, Mentzer left the job to take on the directorship of Workout, a newly launched magazine, in 1985. Unfortunately, the magazine was unsuccessful and ceased publication within the same year. During this time, Mentzer's mental health began to decline rapidly. He faced personal traumas and a growing dependency on narcotics, having started using amphetamines in 1979. This situation led him to spend long periods in and out of hospitals, as his life seemed increasingly out of control. It was only in 1990 that Mike decided to stop using amphetamines, which resulted in a slow but significant improvement in his life. Between 1990 and 2001, he began to reclaim his place in the bodybuilding world as a respected expert in high-intensity training. During this period, he wrote numerous articles, produced training videos, and played an indirect but important role in the development of Dorian Yates, who would go on to win 6 Mr. Olympia titles and become one of the greatest advocates of high-intensity training. However, fate was cruel to Mike. He passed away in 2001 at the age of 49 due to a heart attack. To further compound the tragedy, his brother Ray Mentzer died just 2 days later from kidney failure. Mike Mentzer's life was a roller coaster of highs and lows, with moments of glory in bodybuilding and deep personal struggles. Even with an interrupted career, his influence on the sport remains undeniable. His legacy as a pioneer of high-intensity training, as well as his philosophy on life and training, continues to inspire generations of athletes and trainers. Mike Mentzer was undoubtedly a complex, talented, and revolutionary man who left an indelible mark on the world of bodybuilding. As Peter McGough wrote, his teachings, writings, and videos should serve as a call for modern bodybuilding practitioners to question everything. He encouraged people to discover what truly works for their own bodies and, above all, to train with purpose and intensity. These principles that Mentzer championed are what make him a legend in bodybuilding, someone deserving of being remembered for his contributions. However, sadly, despite his achievements and immense influence on the sport, many people still don't recognize his true value. For many new bodybuilding enthusiasts, Mike Mentzer's name is little known, and his fundamental role in the sport's development is underestimated. It's unfortunate to see that someone who revolutionized so many practices in bodybuilding does not receive the recognition he deserves, especially among the new generations. Mentzer was not just an elite athlete. He was a thinker, a pioneer who challenged established norms and presented a new path for both training and nutrition. His philosophy of high intensity and his ideas on diet brought advances that shaped the way many elite athletes train today. Mentzer's story is inspiring and serves as an example for anyone seeking to achieve physical excellence in an intelligent and efficient manner. What do you think of Mike Mentzer's journey? Do you agree that he is a forgotten genius in the world of bodybuilding? Share your opinion in the comments below. I'm curious to know what you think about Mentzer's legacy and his importance in the sport. And don't leave without dropping a like, as it helps a lot with visibility and motivates me to keep bringing videos like this to you.